Hey, it's Jess, and welcome to Becoming Heartstrong. This isn't a highlight reel, it's real life, and sometimes life is really challenging. But I believe your challenges can fuel a life of meaning and purpose. So each week, I share my honest reflections or talk with leaders, founders, experts, and everyday change makers who show you how to live, lead, and grow with courage. Let's get started. Hey, Nicole, welcome back to Becoming Heartstrong. I'm so glad you're here today.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm really excited because you were here before. We talked a lot about technology and parenting and the challenges that we all have with our kids' devices and kind of how to approach that. But today we're here to talk about your new book, which is coming out on May 6th. I'm so excited. I had the chance to read it over the last few days, and I just want to tell parents out there it's amazing.
Good.
I loved the balance of vulnerability that you put into it about your own self and your own experiences, and then really diving into, I think, insights into parenting that a lot of people don't talk about. And so I'm really excited about it. It's called Free to Fly, The Secret to Fostering Independence in the Next Generation. So before we start, how can people find you and how can they get the book? Because people always wait till the end, but I want to do that at the beginning.
Great. Yeah. So they can go to my website, NicoleRunyon.com. There's a tab called My Book. You can pre-order the book right now, and you would have it in May. But you would have, if you pre-order it now, you have access to $300 worth of bonus material for free. So if you go through my website, you can go ahead and follow step 2 after you've bought the book.
Awesome. Okay. And I checked those out and they look amazing.
Yeah.
And so I really feel like you are here to equip us to be better parents. Is that a fair statement?
That's my mission. Yes.
Okay. That was the thesis of what I got out of the book. And so I wanted to start there. And I thought we would kind of divide, for you, if you're listening, we're kind of going to divide this conversation sort of into two things, two parts. The first part, I want to talk about us as parents. And really, what came out of my podcast season last season was really a lot of the theme of self-leadership, and when we can't lead others until we lead ourselves. And so that's true in the workplace, that's true, in all these different places that we show up as adults, but it's actually really true in our home. And we have to be self-leaders so that we can be good parents. And it's really hard to be a good parent today. And so you're here to help us do that. So I'd love to start talking about this core message of, it's us, the parents, and not the child. That's the issue, to put it bluntly. So can you tell us a little bit about that thesis and why you chose that for this book?
So I had been doing therapy with children for decades, and it really became clear over time that so much of what I was seeing was shouldn't really be labeled as a mental health problem. It shouldn't be labeled as a pathology. It should be seen more under the lens of the family system, because a child is going to react to the environment that they're in. And so I pretty much observed this in my practice for about 8 years before I decided to write this book. And the observation was that so much of the work and so much of the help really needs to be with the parents. And particularly because we're living in some unprecedented times. We are the first generation of parents parenting under this current culture of technology and information being thrown at us all the time, and a lot of fear-based information. So there's just a lot of anxiety in families today. And my goal really was to help children through their parents, because I found that I wasn't really helping children when it was just one-on-one, because they were just going right back into the same environment that was causing the issues to begin with. It just wasn't making sense anymore.
I saw a statistic in your book that said, and correct me if I'm wrong, that of the 100% of kids that you saw, 30% of them really needed to be in therapy, and 70% of it was really the issue with the parents. Is that what you found?
Yes. It was becoming quite clear to me that the kids that were really needing therapy couldn't get the therapy in my community, at least, because all of us therapists who see kids were booked up with cases of what I think is more parents need help than kids need therapy. And, I started to think about the concept of mental health facilities on every corner, because that is really the demand that would be meeting the demand. And I didn't want to see mental health clinics on every corner. It's just not something that's right. And so this is why I decided to educate the adults because, we don't need to be overloading a mental health system that didn't have the infrastructure to begin with. And now it's just completely overloaded. ERs are filling up with cases of adolescent mental health issues. They don't have anywhere to send these kids. It's basically triage, bandage them up, and send them on their not so merry way. And, I really want the kids who need the therapy, who've had known trauma, to have access to it and be able to get it, and not have those kids that don't need it in the system. It's not necessary.
Yeah. So let's talk about first, like one of the first themes that I noticed and that you were kind of talking about is like the parent-child mirror. And this was so insightful to me. You said that what we don't like in our kids, we actually don't like in ourselves. And I was wondering if you could unpack that for us and maybe even share like any kind of personal anecdote or even a story from your travels to sort of illustrate that for people.
Yeah. So, our kids are literally, I mean, they look like us, right? They have the same mannerisms. Sometimes they act like us. They mimic us. They do everything we do. And so it really is, in a lot of ways, when we look at them, it's like looking in the mirror. And we all have had those moments, me included. And I make myself vulnerable in the book and share the experiences I've had with my own, parenting mistakes that I've projected some of that onto my kids. But when we look at them and we see ourselves and those things we don't like in ourselves, or the things that we wish we could have changed about our own childhoods, or something that wasn't resolved and we just carried it into adulthood subconsciously, and then our kids are suddenly doing it and triggering us and making us feel all the feels, and we lose our patience. And so oftentimes, what I see parents doing today, instead of losing patience, is just checking out, because now we have the ability to do that. And the whole family's checked out. The parents are using their devices, the kids are on devices. And so parents don't really have to technically work through those triggers or get to the other side of it and learn patience, because everyone can just kind of be calm, checked out on a device. But we all know that that's not ultimately healing for anybody. And so then what happens to families is kids then get more and more disconnected and then show more and more pathology and then need therapy. But the therapy isn't healing that root cause issue, that parents actually have some stuff to work through themselves.
So you had this example in the book where I really resonated with. So we have something in common. We're both from 5 children families. I'm the
Right.
oldest. I think you're the second oldest in your family.
I am.
And one of the things that I have realized in adulthood more recently is I just had a lot of responsibility as a young person, probably too young. And some of that I think is my natural makeup, and some of it I think was the circumstances that, I was in as a young person. And I like you wrote in the book about how you get frustrated with your kids, like maybe when they weren't taking on their tasks that they should, and they should have more responsibility or initiative, or I'm not, this was kind of how I looked at it. I was like, this, I can resonate with this. And you kind of said that you had to reflect to yourself of your own circumstances. And you said a quote that like I wrote down because it really resonated with me. And it's like, you hide in the help. Like you realize that you were frustrated with your kids. I want you to tell a story, but it's like it resonated so much with me because I get frustrated with my kids when they're not initiating, and they're great boys and they are really helpful, but like I want them to be doing more, and sometimes they should, but it's more about me and what I grew up being expected of or expecting of myself, and I'm pushing that onto them. And so I just want you to tell that story if you don't mind, because I thought that was honestly like so powerful, and it really honestly made me rethink some things that I do as a parent.
No, I'm glad that resonated. And yeah, that's interesting that we have that similarity there, because when you are on the older end of a big family, you tend to take on that responsibility. And I write in the book that it was never really put on me. My mom never said I had to do any of it. I just did it.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt good about doing it. That was how I got my self-worth and my value. And that's why as an adult I discovered that I was hiding in that because it wasn't really ultimately a good way to get that self-worth and validation. Because it wasn't internal, it was more external. I was getting praise for helping my mom with, the younger siblings and the household chores. And so then when my kids came along, and I write in the book about how actually whatever age you are at when your children are at when you struggle in your parenting is likely because it's an age that you struggled with something and it's unresolved.
Wow.
So for me, it was 9. My youngest brother was born when I was almost 9. And by the time I was well into 9, I was, taking care of him. I was changing his diapers. I was feeding him, rocking him to sleep when my mom was busy. And, when my kids both were 9, I started looking at them like, okay, like when are you going to start taking some responsibility here? Like when I was your age. And I used to make those statements. When I was your age, I was changing Uncle Jason's diapers. And by the time I got to my second child, it took me 2 kids to finally figure this out. I'm starting to say this when I was your age. And I stopped myself and I thought, well, that's stupid. Because she doesn't have a younger sibling to change diapers. And frankly, it was me. I was preventing them before 9 from being independent. I was doing too much for them. And so then, of course, at 9, why would I expect them to take that initiative, like you're saying, and do more when I hadn't taught them how or what the expectation was? I just expected it because I expected it of myself. So that was 100% my issue. It wasn't them. It wasn't their fault. Like you said, same with my kids. They're good kids. They're not, they're not disrespectful on purpose. They're not trying to not do things because they're mean or something. But that's how it was making me feel. And I had to work through that on my own because it was my issue.
And so how did you address that with your kids? Like when you kind of realized, I just want to take people through the steps. It's like we have an awareness that what we don't like in our kids is really what we don't like in ourselves or what we struggled with when we were younger. And we kind of come to this awareness and realize, okay, this is more about me than about them. Then what's the next step of how did you address your kids? Like I mean, I don't know. I've sometimes been like, gosh, I'm too hard on them, or why have I reacted this way? And how have you sort of worked on your relationship with your kids when you feel like you've maybe not reacted the best way?
Yeah, so I explain that, if I was impatient, it's because of my own stuff. And at the same time, the expectation is still there. I didn't want them to think, okay, well, we don't have to do anything now because mom's got, an issue she's got to work out.
Yeah.
Right? Everybody has a part and everyone has a role and of a responsibility. And so my responsibility was to work through my own wounding so that I could be the parent they needed, which is a parent that has firm boundaries and rules and consequences when things don't get done. And so I explained to them that the expectation is still they had to do A, B, and C, but I was going to be more patient about asking for that.
So it wasn't that you asked them to do it, it was how you maybe reacted to them in the way that they did it or didn't do it on time or whatever. So it's more your reaction than the actual asking or requirement that you had for them. I think that's an important distinction.
It is because, yeah, I think oftentimes parents that, don't want to seem too strict or upset or disappoint their kids. And so they don't ask for those things.
Right.
Or they think, oh, that's too high of an expectation, for whatever age your kid is. But no, that's absolutely not the point. We need to be able to have high expectations and teach them what our boundaries are and what our rules are and hold that strong for them, but do it kindly and patiently without our own wounds from maybe what didn't get done for us.
So I think if you're listening, like if you're thinking of something that maybe you do in your household, like maybe a first step, would you say to a parent is to really maybe spend some time thinking about your own experience of childhood and maybe where there's some wounding that you need to work through. And is that where would you tell parents to start if they have this awareness?
Yes, that is absolutely where I start with all parents is like what in you are you struggling with or is unresolved and that you're projecting, and what you can do with that depends on how severe it is. I mean,
Yeah.
some parents need therapy for
Mm-hmm.
that. But if it's not something that is rooted in trauma, you can likely do some self-reflection, whether, whatever that is for you, journaling, meditation, going for walks, but just giving yourself that time and space to acknowledge, yeah, you know what, this is my stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and I need to keep myself under control so I can be what they need.
I think
Yeah.
that's such a powerful reflection. You said that, you no longer like diagnose children in your that you and I know like now right now you're focusing on parents and you're not in this season of your life a therapist for children, but in that season like you kind of came to this point where you're like, I'm not going to diagnose children, I'm going to focus on the story. Why and how did you shift that, and can you tell us a little bit about that idea and how you kind of came to that, and then how you've kind of used that in your work?
I started to notice, especially with like the population of adolescent girls, that they were becoming very attached to their diagnosis. And and what I mean by that is like they wouldn't really ever want to move forward because then all of a sudden they didn't belong to a group of people that had something, whether that's anxiety or depression or many girls were self-harming, had eating disorders. And so this is kind of common in therapy where people start to make progress, they start to move forward a little bit, but then they stop because it's a little scary, because it's not what's comfortable or what's known. And a lot of kids today, they're going online and they're in these communities of other kids that are connected over some kind of a diagnosis or some kind of a problem that they have. And that gives them a sense of belongingness, which is really important for teens and adolescents. And they might not feel that in their day to day life. They might not feel connected to their school or their community or even their family. And so for them, that's all they have. And I was growing more and more concerned about that because we're not really supposed to ever look at mental health diagnoses as permanent. And I'm not sure many people know that. I think our culture thinks that it's an illness like diabetes or something, but it's not. It actually is very changeable and curable. But it was seeming like nobody really wanted to do that. So I wanted to come off of the idea of pathologizing, of making something that is actually quite normal. And I mean normal because they're reacting to whatever's going on in their environment that is unhealthy. And so the reaction is normal to what they're going through, but the environment isn't normal or healthy. And I wanted to draw attention to that, more attention to that than on, what is this illness or what is this disorder that they have. And I thought that that would be way more helpful for kids.
So let's talk about this a little bit because I have heard I have a 16-year-old son, and we've talked about this idea of kids identifying with their anxiety or their and he's mentioned that people, he's experienced that through friend groups and people at school. And then you said, that people think their mental health diagnosis is not changeable or alterable. And so how do you address that like with parents? Because I think sometimes our parents like maybe they're frustrated at home, things are challenging, their kid gets a diagnosis, they're like, oh thank God, now I know what the problem is. They're anxious, they're depressed. And then what? Like if because if you're saying we don't want to stay in the diagnosis, and then you have parents who 70% of the time need some help themselves to kind of weather these parenting challenges, like how do you organize that in your own mind of what would you do next in a situation like that?
Yeah, that is a really good point because when they can say, "Oh, the child has something," then there's a scapegoat. There's something to point to, and then they are seemingly relieved of their responsibilities to make any changes to work on, those symptoms, because then, like we said, it's set in stone, so they think. There's nothing we can do. And then it becomes all about the treatment, the therapy, the medication. And so what I really try to do is to help parents understand that it is, it's a reaction, and the environment needs to change, because when the environment changes, you see a lot of these symptoms go away. Like for example, ADD is one of them. And now we finally have some research to back this up, but many of us have known for a long time that ultra-processed food and foods high in sugar and dyes and artificial colors and flavors cause attention and focus issues in kids. And so I often will tell parents, if they're having a rough morning, which is so common for kids, they have trouble getting out of bed, they have trouble getting to school, or they have trouble, in the morning actually focusing, and the teachers are reporting home that there's problems. I often will talk about, okay, breakfast. I mean, if you're eating, Pop-Tarts or sugary cereal for breakfast, you're not going to have a very good morning. You're not going to be able to focus and pay attention. So simple things like just changing what they eat in the morning can really make a difference with some of those symptoms. And, that's all environmental. Why are we pointing the finger at the kid and saying, you have this problem, you need all this treatment, you need accommodations at school? And then suddenly, like I say, they're internalizing this as if it's something they have and something they have to manage their whole lives. And that's really sad to me. I don't want to see that anymore. It really breaks my heart.
A quick shout out to the Ethan Lindberg Foundation. That's the nonprofit I started to support caregiving families, and also to Play Heartstrong, our youth sports program teaching kids how to grow through challenge. Both are part of the bigger Heartstrong mission. You can learn more and shop our merch at theheartstrong.com. But are there situations where kids really do have ADD in the sense where they do need some support in medicine or otherwise? I mean, I know that I don't have a kid with ADD, but I know that there's a lot of differing opinions on that. But I guess I just want to, for people listening, sometimes as a mother who has a medically complex child, I know sometimes in the world it's the quick fixes and the natural things aren't going to fix some things. They're going to help and make it better. And so I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on that. I'm just curious, because I guess there's just different people, and I don't have a child with that, but I've heard people say different things, and I'm wondering if you, in your opinion, if it's all environmental or if there are other things that impact that.
Yeah, that's a great question. I know this is very controversial, and people don't like when I say what I say. And I think absolutely there are cases of legitimate ADD, but it's very rare. And I can tell you, in the 21 years that I saw kids, I can count on one hand how many I legitimately could diagnose with ADD.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, it's not just the food, it's a combination of everything. Anxiety crosses over with ADD. So if you're anxious, you're going to have trouble focusing. If you're on screens too much, if you're not sleeping because you're on devices, if your parents are doing too much for you and not letting you develop that executive functioning. I mean, there's a lot that goes into a kid that's looking really dysfunctional, that's having a hard time. And what I see a lot of is this idea of, well, he just can't because of the ADD. And so it's okay, if your kid really is struggling, has legitimate executive functioning issues, totally understandable, but that doesn't let them off the hook for continuing to organize themselves and find some system to remember things and take care of what they need to take care of. I've heard many parents of older teenagers who will still drive their kids' cleats up to the school because they forgot them for after school practice. And the excuse is, well, he has ADD. And I just don't buy into that. I think he absolutely is capable of finding some way to remember those cleats, some system. Because what is he going to do out in the real world when, when you aren't taking care of him anymore? So that's an important distinction, I think, for people who are in that camp of, well, it's neurological, it's neurodiversion and all of that. Yeah, sure, some of it is. Same with autism. We can put that in that same category. But now we're finding that actually a lot of autism diagnoses are related to many of the things that I just talked about, like too much screen usage and getting locked in and not learning those social skills early on, as well as the food and the inflammation in the body and what it's doing to young developing bodies and brains.
One of the things that I heard you say there that I liked was that kids are capable. And I think sometimes we don't, especially, and I mean, I'm guilty of this too, is that we don't first say that. We go to the problem that we're noticing or the challenge that they're having instead of saying, first of all, no, they're capable. How do we set up the environment for them to be successful versus, going in and trying to fix it because this is the problem, and I think that is really, it's something that I've had to learn. I mean, one of my sons is dyslexic, and we learned about this during COVID because we were home, and I was like, oh my God, this kid cannot spell. And he went through this really amazing training program, and he's doing awesome now. And, he had a lot of time where he was really struggling and missing assignments and doing all of these things. And kind of when he got through this training program that he went through, it was like something just turned on in his brain in such a cool way. And now he's like the most responsible person. And he is like, I want to do this for myself. And I realized that sometimes during that process, like I didn't look at him as capable as he is, because he just needed his brain to be like rewired in a different way. And once he got what he needed, and I wasn't just looking at the symptoms of the problem, and now he still has things that he struggles with, but he's like, Mom, I'm going to figure it out on my own. He's like, I want to figure this out. And I have to let him. And even if things don't always go the way that I would want them to go for him, like he wants to figure it out. And he's really taught me about this idea that you hold them both in tension, right? You understand that you learn a little bit differently than other people, and so you set up that environment for success, but it doesn't mean that you don't have the same expectations of learning and responsibility. And it's a hard balance to walk, but I've learned a lot from him, watching him go through that. And it's hard to let your kids fail sometimes and let them, go through hard things. Like I think that's the other piece that I would love to address kind of as we're talking about parents is we love our kids so much and we want to be good parents and we don't want them to suffer and we don't want them to go through hardship because I think it's our natural inclination to be protective and to protect them. But how do we reframe that in our mind, especially in the world that we live in? This idea that we love our kids and we want to protect them, and some of us, we just want to scoop them in and like protect them from this big bad world, which is, I feel like that a lot, but yet they're in this world. And so how do we find that balance as parents to do that?
Yeah, well, I love what you said about your son and how allowing him to do it himself and work through it and get to that place where he feels capable has fostered that independence in him where he can say, no, I want to do it. I want to take care of it. And that's how we find the balance, is we know that it's good for them. And our intention, like you say, is we love them. We want to protect them. We want to keep them safe and make them okay out in the world. So if we know that actually what is going to do those things is giving them the independence, letting them fail, letting them get to the other side of that and feel capable, then we know that's good for them. So that's the choice we make, even though it makes us really uncomfortable and sometimes downright painful for us. Yeah.
The other thing that I've reflected on in parenthood is like every kid, I think, needs to find some place that they feel successful. And I think that building confidence is a really big thing for kids. And I think that a lot of times with parents, it's like I'm saying this collectively and generally, I think parents, we have things that we liked as a young person and that we were good at. And we want, a lot of times I think this happens in sports a lot. It's like we want our kids to like or play the sport that we play, or to be good in the way that we were good. And some kids just don't have that interest. Like they have something else. And I talk to parents a little bit about checking themselves on, you know, helping their kids explore the thing that they might be good at. Like you might have been like a college athlete and your kid might like bowling. I mean, it just might happen. And so sometimes, but I think finding that thing that the kid is good at is in there where they can build confidence. And I've seen that in my kids is like the game changer.
Absolutely. Yes. And one of the things that is important, and it's an important distinction there, is sometimes they're going to have a natural inclination to for something or a little bit of a natural ability, but they still have to learn that they have to work to be good at something. Because I think a lot of kids are just waiting to be good at something and maybe they never find it and then they lack the confidence to even try anything. So I love the idea of letting them lead the way and letting them decide, hey, this is what I like, but then encouraging them to put the work and the effort into it too. And I think that that's what parents want to see. So, right, if you could check yourself as the parent and acknowledge, hey, they will find something. It may not be the thing you did, but they will find something. And then at that point, you can do a little nudging and pushing, because that is something that most of us parents have the inclination to do, right? Because we see it, we see that they could be successful and they could build their confidence, but they have to know that confidence doesn't come from just doing something that you're good at. I know a girl who is really, really good at the guitar, but it's super easy for her. It comes easy. And she doesn't think that that's something that she's good at. It doesn't, it's not really a confidence builder. So
Because it's naturally just so easy for her.
exactly.
Oh, interesting.
So I've encouraged her dad to help her find something that's challenging to where she can get to the other side of that and then get the confidence.
That's really good. That's a really important distinction. I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah.
Parents today are really distracted and overwhelmed and anxious, and in some ways, rightly so. Like there's a lot of pressures, I think, on families today. Life is expensive, and there's often two careers, and there's all just different kinds of things that people go through. But, what does it mean to be like a grounded parent? So that we can help our kids feel grounded in their life and so that they can be successful.
I think that, there's a lot of distractions from being fully present. And being fully present is being a grounded parent because when you're present, you know what your child needs. So you're right. We are, inundated as parents by, a lot of fear about what could happen to our kids if we don't ABC, a lot of pressure and guilt if we don't fall all over ourselves to, do things for them or put them in travel sports and travel every weekend and do all the things. But what's missing in all of that is presence, connection, and parent instinct. So when we don't have all the distractions and the information isn't, coming at us like a train, and we can just sit with our kids and be quiet and not be on devices and just be together in the room, then we start to pick up on what their emotional needs are, what you can do to help them with a problem. And that doesn't mean solve the problem for them. That means be with them in the room, sit with them, and talk to them about it and ask them questions and ask them, what can you do and how can I help? That really is true connectedness and grounding because we're following our instincts. We're feeling ourselves and feeling them at the same time.
You said a word, parent instinct. You said to connect with that. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, because there's so much information being thrown at us and there's so much fear, parents lack trust in themselves today. And what I mean by that is we don't always know what to do. We don't know. I've heard so many parents say, gosh, if there was just a book that said, do this and 1, 2, 3. And I think people really do feel that they don't know what to do and they want to be told what to do. And I don't think that's the answer, is some expert telling people what to do. And that's not what I try to do in the book at all. I tried to help parents know, educate them about child development and what your kids need and when they need it, but also, put your devices down. Don't overdo I call them Disney days. You don't have to overdo a day with your kid. You don't have to take them somewhere and spend a ton of money or go on vacation. You could just, be in the backyard pulling weeds together. And when kids are doing things like that, they're talking to you because they feel connected to you. And so parents' instincts are turned off because of all of the distractions in our lives. But if we're not distracted and we're just connecting and we're hanging out with our kids and we're not on devices, we can tap into what we know to be true and right for our own child, because we are the experts for our own child. Nobody knows our kids better than we do.
No, I love that. That's probably one of the best things you've said so far. I think that's really true. Yeah, I mean, like, moms know. I say that a lot. Moms just know, and it's easy to question ourselves and look around and wonder if it's true, or did someone else do that, or did someone else say that? But it's like we just know. One of the things you talk about in the book is really helping your child to live, allow for discomfort. And you say that, like, discomfort is an indicator your child is learning something, and it's hard to. Again, back to that instinct of wanting to protect your kids. It's that instinct. How do you help your child be in discomfort, and how do you, as a parent, allow yourself to allow them to be in discomfort?
Yeah. So I always think of the first time that I had to my oldest is 16, and the first time I had to let him be uncomfortable, he was 4 months old, and he was doing the thing where from the back they turn onto their belly, and it's a struggle, right? Like, he was just grunting and really trying hard, and I remember, like, sitting on my hands and being like, don't help him, don't help him, don't help him. But I really wanted to help him, because I knew that if I helped him, he wouldn't learn to roll over, and rolling over is really important for a baby's physical development, and then physical development scaffolds the brain for growth. Like, that movement in infancy, it couldn't be more important. And I knew that instinctually, but inside I was dying because I hated to see him struggling. I mean, he was my baby, right? I didn't want him to be hurt. I didn't want him to have that discomfort, but I knew it was important and good for him. So at whatever age your kids are, whether they're infants or 18, you have to know that whatever they're struggling with is necessary, because growing is painful. And the only way out of that is to go through the pain. You can't avoid it.
I think that's so true. So I want to ask you a question that I was thinking about this morning. My family, speaking of myself, we've gone through a lot of challenging family situations with the health of, our kids and all the ripple effects that happens in a family. And, families listening have lots of different challenges. And, sometimes what I struggle with is, how much do I let my kids into what's actually going on? And my kids are 16 and 13, so they're a little bit older maybe than some people listening. But how do you gauge that as a parent when there's a family situation that is really challenging and at some point may affect the kids, and the parents are going through it, so they're struggling, and we want to protect the kids and we don't want them to feel discomfort or emotionally hurt. But at the same time, it's almost dishonest not to be straight with them. Like, how do you recommend parents think through that? And I think because that goes along to, in my mind, to like the discomfort. Like, you want to keep them from the discomfort, but you also want to be honest. And where is that line?
Yes. So, kids are very intuitive, so they know when something's up.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're lying to them about it, you're saying, "Oh, everything's fine, don't worry," they then get confused, and it can even seem um, like some form of what is that word? It's escaping me. Gaslighting,
Mm-hmm.
where they know something's up, and you're telling them, "No, nothing's up." So never lie to your kids. And if they ask you a question, be direct and explain it to them. Obviously, age appropriately.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want, if it's a big problem, you don't want to put that problem on them.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't want to explain everything, but you can, give them the Cliff Notes version or a watered down version, and just assure them that it's an adult problem and that's
Mm-hmm.
for the adults to work out, not for the kids. And if they have questions or they want to talk about it, you're open to that.
Mm-hmm.
Because opening up that window for them to be able to consistently talk about it, because it could be an ongoing issue,
Mm-hmm.
is really important, so they don't internalize that, "Oh, I don't want to be a burden, I don't want to ask about that, I don't want to upset." I've heard a lot of kids say, "Well, if I talk to mom and dad about it, I'm going to upset them, and I don't want to
Mm-hmm.
upset them." So just being open to say, "Hey, yeah, we might cry when we talk about it. And
Mm-hmm.
this might be really painful, this might be really hard, but that's okay. You don't avoid asking
Mm-hmm.
about it, because that's how it goes. That's how you deal with something that's hard."
Mm-hmm. Hmm. I love how you said like that's an adult problem because I think that's such an important distinction. It gives them the security of knowing that mom and dad are this is their issue to come to work through, but we're not going to tell you it's not true. And I think that that is, I think sometimes even looking back to my own childhood, you perceive something in your family, then you want to fix it. I mean, I'm the oldest, so you always want to fix everything. And I love that distinction of assuring our kids, like, this is an adult problem, but this is what's going on. I think I love that idea. I think that's a really good tool. So
Yeah.
I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the specific cultural issues that you tackled in the book. And there's a lot of them, and we can't get into all of them, but there were just a few that I thought would be interesting to our listeners and just honest, because they're things that if you're working on yourself as a parent and trying to be a good parent, you're also probably tackling some of these other challenging issues. Um, and we talked last time a lot about the role of screens. You talk about it a lot in the book. And so I was wondering, like, what are some of the biggest ways that devices are stunting the growth of our kids? And I know that you can look at that at different ages, but I'm wondering if you can just give like a little bit of your direction to parents on this issue. You don't have to you get into a lot of details of the book. People should read the book. You give us recommendations based on age and all of that. But just you can give sort of the 30,000-foot view of what parents should be thinking about when they think about screens and their kids.
Yeah. Um, you know, I think the biggest issue is that the devices are being used to avoid hard things, to
Mm,
avoid growing, to avoid independence. And they're being used this way because they're addictive and they feel good.
mhm,
And it's easy, right?
mm,
So, if your 3-year-old is tantruming, it's just
mhm,
so easy to give the iPad because you know that that's going to calm her down.
mhm,
If your 16-year-old is lacking the ability to be ready for driving and being responsible and kind of accountable, then it's so easy for him to be able to press a button and have food delivered to the door, or not have to go out and run errands because Amazon's so simple. You can get it
mhm,
the day of if you really need something. So the use of screens to avoid development in childhood is, I think, the bird's eye view of the biggest issue with it. And then because of that, kids are showing signs of mental health decline. They're having behavioral issues, right? If your 3-year-old isn't able to work through that tantrum because you give them an iPad every time, then they're going to be 6 and 7 still tantruming because they never learned how to regulate at 3. So it's
mhm,
preventing from growth every step of the way.
mhm. And so, how do you? integrate that? I mean, we live in a world full of screens. I mean, the one thing that I frankly don't like is that at home we're trying to limit screens, but at school they're on you know, a device all day, kind of taking tests on a device and doing that. Personally, I don't like that, but I mean, it's part of the world that we live in. So how do you as a parent sort of navigate that, being realistic, but also, being age appropriate? And like, is there kind of a rule of thumb or sort of some advice that you give to parents as they're trying to figure that out?
Yeah, I think that goes back to what we were talking about earlier, where parents are the leaders of the family. And
Mm-hmm.
leaders don't tell people what to do, they show people what to do.
Mm,
And so it's all about
I like
modeling.
that.
Yeah, it's all about showing them this is how we use devices, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like a family value system. This is how we
Mm-hmm.
do it in our family. And the way we use devices in our family is for a tool and not a toy. So if they have to use it for school, which I agree with you, I don't love, and I talk about ed tech, educational technology in the book and the problems.
Mm-hmm.
But if they have to use it for school, then here's how you use it. And
Mm-hmm.
you could have whatever boundaries and rules you want around that. They could be using it in a central space in the house, not in their bedroom, so you can see what they're doing. A lot of kids tend to get distracted on different sites and tabs while they're supposedly doing homework.
Mm-hmm.
You could set timers for
Mm-hmm.
homework so that, if they are getting distracted, they are recognizing it. And just modeling yourself, right? I mean, a lot of people are working remote from home, so kids are seeing parents on devices all day and all into the evening. And so parents really have to model that, hey, when we're not working, whenever that is, we're not scrolling, we're not on devices, we're connecting. You could simply have phone-free zones in the house. I always suggest that to families. In our house, we have the dinner table is always phone-free, and then our living room
Mm-hmm.
is just a phone-free zone, so we all know if we're in there. And sometimes we all break the rule and we call each other out. We're not perfect, but my husband and I are in charge of that, and
Mm-hmm.
make sure we're cognizant and aware of it all
Mm-hmm.
the time, and making sure our own usage isn't out of control, and we're showing them that it's a tool.
I love that leaders show people what to do, not tell them what to do. That's I love that. That's really, really good. What you talked about too, I think sort of I'm going to say they're like hot button issues. Like, there was a couple in the book, but you talked about gender identity and cultural influence, and I want to talk about it because I think it's all over the place. It's talked about a lot, and so much so that sometimes I think it's like seen as something bigger than it actually is in culture, but it's out there. And so why do you think these issues with gender identity have increased? And, if a parent is listening and their child is like experiencing gender dysphoria, like what do they do? Because that's a big thing to face as a parent.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's why I put it in the book. And I'm making myself pretty vulnerable with it because most in my field are doing what's called affirming care. And what that means is when the child comes to therapy and says, "Oh, I think I'm, a different gender," then there's no exploration of that. There's no digging deeper. There's just a referral to medical care, and immediately they get started on puberty blockers and then go to cross sex hormones and then eventually have surgery. And this is all before their brains are fully developed. And many of young adults who transitioned as kids are now coming out as detransitioners and saying, hey, stop, just put a pause on this. Like, these kids are too young. We were too young. We were, manipulated. The parents are manipulated. The parents are told if you don't transition your kid, they will die by suicide, which is not
Mhm.
true. The studies actually show that depression and suicide are higher after transitioning
Mm.
because kids think that's the quick fix. Like, they're going to feel better about everything once they transition, and they rarely ever do. Because, and this is the reason for why I talk about this, gender dysphoria is something that absolutely needs to be treated, and it needs to be treated in therapy before being treated medically. And oftentimes, what's behind it is sexual abuse. Many of these kids feel that their bodies are a betrayal and they don't want their bodies anymore. Many of these kids are autistic. So they're going online and they're going into chat groups where people are saying, oh, if you just transition, you'll feel so much better about your social awkwardness. That's the problem. And they're being manipulated because they don't really understand the intricacies behind it. And so I think it's really a problem that we have the therapy world as the first line of defense, affirming it immediately without exploring it. So my advice to parents, if your kid is struggling with gender dysphoria or questioning anything whatsoever, find a therapist that subscribes to exploratory therapy. That's the word that you would want to look for, the vernacular. And there are therapists out there that do. It's not the majority, that's for sure. But you definitely want somebody to dig deep into that. Because you might find, and I found this out of the 4 cases I had over the years of gender dysphoria, 3 out of the 4 decided not to transition.
Wow.
So you might find that exploring it and digging deep into why, there's oftentimes a lot of unresolved depression and anxiety, and again, like unresolved trauma, maybe that was never even reported. So if you dig deep into that and you find the actual root cause, you can help the child without having permanent physical changes to their body that they don't want. And by no means, and I say this in the book, am I saying that gender identity is, gender transition doesn't exist, that there aren't legitimate cases of people who, do feel that they're born in the wrong body and they end up transitioning. But I don't think that we should be so quick to allow children to do it. And putting them in this system that frankly is set to make trillions of dollars off of children transitioning, because now it's becoming so common. Like you said, it's everywhere. Big Pharma sees a lot of dollar signs in transitioning these children quickly because they have a lifetime patient once they do transition. They have to take medications forever.
It's kind of like people don't maybe realize this, but if you have a transplant of any sort, you have to basically be on meds your whole life to suppress your immune system, so your body doesn't reject the organ that has been transplanted into you. And my oldest son needed a heart transplant, so I kind of went through all that and understood that intimately. And that they always say with a heart transplant, like, you're basically taking one disease and changing it for another. I mean, truly, because it's not always, some people have great experiences with heart transplants, but some people have really not so great experiences because now they're on all these meds and all these drugs. So I think sometimes when we have a problem, and again, like, I'm not being, short about it, but like, we have a problem, we have to understand everything that we're going to be going through on the other side, right? Like, I think so many times in our culture, like, we want a quick fix. It's kind of like back to what we were talking about discomfort in our kids. Like, we don't want our kids to be uncomfortable, so we just do it for them and don't give them the opportunity to explore and to be uncomfortable. I think that's a similar thing here. Is it's a big deal to face it as a parent, but we should dig deep into it, and we shouldn't be afraid to do that, is what I hear you saying, so that kids can ultimately, as adults, make the best decision for themselves that they can.
Absolutely, yeah. And government needs to be supportive of that too, because I know there's a lot of parents who feel that they can't get the exploratory care, or they can't just hit pause on transitioning because the child services may take their child away, which is just insane that parents aren't able to make these decisions for their own children. And that really goes back to that nobody knows your kid like you do. So if your kid comes to you and says, yeah, I want to transition, and in your heart of hearts, hey, you were always a girly girl, like, why all of a sudden now? There must be something else going on. You should be allowed to trust that without anybody threatening
And explore it.
Yeah.
For yourself and your kid.
That's right. Yeah.
And I think that's part of protecting your child, frankly, is allowing them that opportunity to explore.
Yeah.
So you also talked about pornography in youth, and I wanted to talk about that because I think it's a real thing, and kids are on devices. And I always say to my boys about phones, I'm like, you can be connected to some of those amazing things on this device, and you can be connected to the worst things in the world. And that's the risk of it, right? And so you talked about it in the book, but I'd love for you to share like how easy, I think I was really surprised how easy it was for kids to access, and how a lot of times kids weren't even looking for it. Like it wasn't their fault per se. Like they were just looking for something else on the internet and came across it. Um, and I think it really taints later relationships and what people's expectations are of loving relationships. And so I'm wondering if you just share a little bit about that and kind of how you suggest parents talk to their kids about it and kind of face this issue.
Yeah. So, yeah, that accidental, I think it's like over 50% of 11 to 13-year-olds find it accidentally. And then they've suddenly seen something that they're not ready for, they don't understand, but that they think is normal because many kids, that's their first exposure to anything sexual. Many kids have their first sexual experiences on apps like Roblox. There's groomers on there. They go into kids' spaces. They pose as somebody your age, and then suddenly they're showing you nude photos of themselves or asking you to send them nude photos. And it's a window. It's like a gateway into some online sexual world that to them is real. To the rest of us, we recognize these are actors. Many of them not paid or paid very little. Many of the women that go into the pornography industry are sexually abused themselves, and have lots of wounding around that. But yet the kids are being exposed to this, particularly the boys, and they think that this type of sex is normal. It's not. It's not. I always say it's not your father's Playboy. It's very violent and not healthy for girls and women. And so then the boys are expecting the girls to do the things they're watching on pornography. And I've seen a lot of the girls, in the aftermath of, yeah, okay, they didn't say no, but they also didn't realize how it would make them feel to be treated this way during sex. And then that blurs the lines of consent, and they feel very much betrayed and taken advantage of. But they don't know what to do because, again, they didn't say no. And so it really is quite heartbreaking how they're learning how to like relate to each other, how they lack intimacy, because none of this is intimate. It's very disconnected and transactional. And again, how normalized that is. And so what I notice is that parents today, they don't talk to their kids about sex early on. We're still using, even early on, we're still using like wee for, penis, right? Like part of talking to your kids about sex is talk early and talk often and use the right, correct anatomical terms and show them that you're comfortable with these conversations because they're not going to be. And so you have to lead the way, model for them that, yeah, these aren't fun topics to talk about, but we're going to talk about them. As squirmy as you are, you're not going to avoid that. And so if you talk to them early and often, then the conversation of pornography can be not so scary because you've already had those conversations. I recommend talking to them very young, younger than really they should be, frankly, probably around 10 or 11. And this is because they will see it under somebody else's roof or even at school. A lot of these firewalls don't protect kids from this nonsense, if you can believe that. So they will see it, and it's better coming from you and for you to like be open to saying, hey, if you see this, you're not in trouble. Please come and tell me, because I want to clear any questions up or make sure you know that this isn't normal. And that you're open to those conversations because they're going to feel a lot of shame and guilt about it, and be even quite traumatized sometimes by the things they're seeing. They need to be able to come to you as the safe person to talk about it.
So just being open with them and honest and real with yourself about the fact that they actually are seeing these things and that it is actually real. I think that's probably one of the most important things you said. And it is alarming, like that's so young. And it's back to that you want to protect your kids and the way to protect them is maybe just to be more honest with them. I think that's what I'm hearing from you. You know,
Absolutely. And just,
like it or not, right?
yeah, yeah, like it or not. I always tell the story when my son, was old enough and my husband and I were talking to him about it. And he was so squirmy and so like, oh, do we have to talk about this? This is so terrible. And I just, I said, yeah, I know it's uncomfortable, but we are talking about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. I think that that's really good. So, kind of as we wrap up here, I want to talk a little bit about individuation. And I think that like creating individuation with your kids and allowing them to be individuals. You talked in the book about developing fidelity in our teens and why that's important. So I'm wondering if you can just talk a little bit about this individuation slash separation from parents that happens. And it's hard to go through that as a parent because it's such a, now that I have kids the age that I have, parenthood is so weird, right? Because you have these little people, you're so excited to have them. They're like your whole world, and really you're raising them to leave you. I mean, and that sounds really depressing. And I think that all stages are wonderful. And, and there are stages when, I have friends with kids in college and like, it's really fun and it's fun to, have those relationships with them then. But it's true. It's hard to transition through these things. But having grounded, strong, independent kids is like what the world is in desperate need of. So we're really giving a gift to the world when we give grounded, independent kids to the world. But how do we help them? Like, what is the individuation process? And then, like, how can we support them in that as parents?
So there are 3 points in childhood where children individuate, and those are at 2, 9, and 16. So it starts as young as 2. And if you are hearing this and your kid is way older than 2, it's all good. You can absolutely make these changes. But when they're 2, that's the time when they're saying no and do it by myself and I will not. And this is well known for being the terrible twos because it's your boundary and theirs, and there's this conflict. And oftentimes they're going to have tantrums because you have to say no and they want to do something. Well, that actually is leading to a connection to self. That's the first time they stand on their own 2 feet and say, this is who I am, this is what I want. And what parents can do during this time is respect that when they want to do something by themselves. Of course, as long as it's within reason and it's safe, many parents will do it for them because they don't think they can do it by themselves. But they should absolutely be given the opportunity to attempt that so they can come out the other side and respect your boundary, because your boundary is set in place for their safety, as in, no, you cannot run in the street. So the reason why so many kids are resistant to parents at this age is because they're not really being given enough independence, and parents don't know when to give them independence or what particular independence to give, so then they fight and they resist. And I hear a lot of parents say, well, it's actually not the terrible 2s anymore, it's the terrible 3s. And so the reason for that is because this issue is going into like 3, 4, and 5, and it shouldn't be, but it only is because parents aren't allowing that individuation at 2. And so the next phase is at 9, and this is a time when kids develop a consciousness around themselves as individuals outside of the family. So they become interested in friends, they want to please their teachers, they might become more interested in like organized activities during this time because they start seeing themselves in the world. And that can come with a lot of anxiety, so parents will often prevent their kids from independence during this time because they think they're not ready, or they think, oh, they're anxious, I need to help them. But actually that anxiety is quite normal at this age and necessary to work through to get to the other side of, because every time a child pulls away from a parent, they connect to themselves. And so many kids today are lacking that connection to themselves. This is why they're going online and identifying with a certain disorder or identifying as gender dysphoric, because they don't feel like they can attach to themselves in the real world. And it's because so much of their development is getting prevented and stunted. And so if they, work through some of that individuation at 2 and 9, then by 16, they're more ready to take on the responsibility of driving, to be held accountable for, getting ready for the world, right? Like how many kids do we know today that struggle with, well, I don't know what I want to do, or I don't know what college I want to go to, or, and they end up just staying at home because they're not ready for that fully fledged growth and independence. And 16 is a really important time because it's the last time that they're going to get that burst of individuation. And then that's going to cause the momentum for them to lead forward.
So being aware of that. I mean, I have a 16-year-old, so I'm thinking about that as you're saying it, but really encouraging that individuation and that independence at that age. And, so that's like you said, when they start driving and they start launching a bit more into the world and thinking about their future, right, and what they want to do. And yeah, I think that's really interesting to go through those ages.
Yeah, and so many kids today aren't driving because they're not ready for that. They're too anxious, and even parents are anxious to allow them to drive because they don't think they're ready. And that's because all along the way they weren't being given those opportunities to individuate. And
So if a parent's listening and they're like, "Oh crap, I've done some things wrong here, and I want to figure out what to do, and I have a 13-year-old or a 15-year-old or whatever," what are a couple things that you could leave parents with that they could do?
Yeah. So whatever age your kid is, I would say give them some opportunities to fail and get out of their way to make sure that they do fail. And that's not to say that this is going to affect their safety, of course.
Sure.
So a good example would be if you are on top of their grades and their assignments and making sure they're always turning things in. Take a week off from that and let them figure it out. And they might fall flat on their face, and their grades might plummet a little bit, but it's just a week. And that week is an opportunity for them to learn, hey, like mom and dad aren't going to be there forever to hold my hand through this. I have to figure out, like, what is my system? How can I remember my homework? How can I remember to turn it in? What do I need to do? And that does two things. It prevents the parents from being burdened, because parents today are super overwhelmed and burdened by too much. And then that helps the child to get to the other side of feeling like they're capable. And, being disappointed. Hey, yeah, I made that mistake. That really sucks. But look, I learned from it, because then like the next week, mom only checked my grades once, and I actually had it pretty together, better than the week before. And then so on and so on. And so then they feel good about being able to do those things on their own. And like we said, that capability is really necessary and
It's really
important.
important.
And it encourages them to just kind of keep going.
What do you think about apps like Life 360?
I am not a fan. I'm probably the
Okay.
only person ever that is not a fan. And it's because I think it's too much. Well, it's two things. One, it's a lot of fear. And yeah, I mean, I have a 16-year-old driving. It's scary. I won't lie. It's very scary. But when we have an app on them, then we think about it way more than we should be. And that energy isn't good for them, because we're basically telling them, hey, we don't trust you. We have to watch you still. You're not ready for this. And again, at 16, 17, 18, these are all like the end of their like pushing out the door, and that, the flying that we want them to do. And if we say, I don't trust you, I still have to watch you, then they're not going to trust themselves. And it's at some point we have to take the training wheels off, and we have to say, okay, like, you're ready for this, and I am going to get ready for this, even though I'm not. And I trust you. And when you do that, you send them that message that they are ready, even if they're a little scared, even if they don't feel ready. Because we know today's college students, we know today's young adults, those Gen Zers are really struggling out in the world. They're not well. Their employers don't want to hire them. They've come out and said, we don't want to hire them because they're not showing up to work. They're highly dysfunctional. They can't get themselves organized. They're calling in sick too much. And that's because their parents didn't make them ready for the world and were too scared to do that. And so they develop this fear that I can't do it or I need a lot of help to do it. So they're looking to their employers and the companies they work for to help them. And that's not what companies do. And employers are really struggling with how do we help them? They're trying, but they can only do so much. They can't be a surrogate parent.
Yeah.
So us parents really need to allow, again, for our own discomfort, work through that, get to the other side of it to be able to say, yeah, okay, I'm going to let you do this. And it's hard, but it's what you need.
It's what you need. Gosh, being a parent's hard, isn't it? There's
so
so
hard.
many things.
There's so many things. I don't have Life 360 on my son, but there are definitely times, he's newly licensed. He was licensed in October, so, a few months.
It's new.
But there have been times in these months where I wish I had. And, because I'm like, oh, he didn't answer my call and where is he? And it's getting late and all the things. But, we have a curfew and he comes home on time every time. And there's no reason. We trust him. There's no reason for us to put it on there because he's a safe driver. He's responsible. He's talked about how there's peer pressure from his friends to drink and drive, and he's very serious about that. And so why would we do that? Why would we tell him, hey, you're being responsible, but we don't trust you? That's not good energy for him.
Yeah. And so I love the idea of just reminding our kids how capable they are and really and reminding them not only with our words but with our actions and helping them to have responsibilities, which reinforces confidence, which reinforces independent adults. So I'm wondering, like, as we wrap up, I was thinking when I was reading this book, I'm like, what did you learn about yourself when you were writing this book? What came to you? Because it's writing a book is a huge experience. It takes a lot of time. It doesn't happen quickly, and so I'm wondering, like, what did you learn about yourself?
I learned that I'm way more capable than I thought I was.
I see a theme.
That's right. Yeah, that's it. I mean, I've been working on that in myself for many years. It was always on my list of goals, but it was a secret. I never shared it with anyone because inside I thought, oh, that'll never happen. Like, oh, I would love to write a book, but that will never happen. Or I imagined it like when I was old, like old. So the fact that I took 5 days out of my life a year ago and wrote the manuscript. And
Wow.
I mean, it's changed a lot since then with
Sure.
edits and everything, but it came out of me like I didn't even expect. It was just in there. And I realized when I was done with those 5 days that I had been writing this book for 20 years.
Wow.
Yeah. And then I realized, wow, like I am capable of so much more than I thought. And now I think about, okay, well, what's the next book?
I love that. It's like giving yourself permission to do something that you really wanted to do, I agree that sometimes we keep our dreams or ideas to ourselves, and like speaking them out loud and giving them life is really what gets us to the next step of them. Well, congratulations, Nicole, on an amazing book.
Thank you.
Free to Fly, out May 6th. You can go to NicoleRunyon.com to find the book. Is it on Amazon also?
Yeah, you can get it in pretty much any online retailer. It's
Okay.
130 retail online stores.
All right.
But yeah, if you go through my website, you can get the bonus material.
Okay, so buy the book, get the bonus material. You can find her at NicoleRunyon.com. And on Instagram, you are, remind me?
iGeneration Mental Health.
iGeneration Mental Health on Instagram. And we'll link all of those in the show notes. Thank you so much, Nicole, for spending time with me today and for talking about this really important topic and a challenge that we all face. And I love your mission of helping parents to raise independent, grounded kids. So congratulations.
Thank you. And thank you for having me. It's an honor. I love the work that you're doing. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for being here, and thanks for listening to Becoming Heartstrong. If this episode spoke to you, take just a moment and share it with someone that you care about. And make sure that you're subscribed so you don't miss what's next. Before I go, I want to remind you that your challenges aren't the end of your story. They're the doorway to the best version of you. So keep going and keep becoming heartstrong. I'll see you next time.